Now, Manning Marable, who wrote How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America, wrote, quote, "Terror is not the product of violence alone, but is created by the random, senseless, and even bestial use of coercion against an entire population. An entire community can be impacted by the mistreatment of one individual. So, men do not have to rape all women for all women to be afraid. The U.S. government does not have to go after all people of Arab descent for everybody who is Arab or may look like they are Arab to be afraid. This is the culture of fear that we're living with, and we're not talking about it. These current traumas are not new moments. They're tapping into histories that we haven't yet dealt with. The politics of retaliation that we're seeing now parallels the violence that's rooted in U.S. history, starting with the original trauma, which is the attempted genocide of Native people, and continuing with the 250-plus years of slavery. After Hurricane Katrina, Diane and I noticed that the people around us were shouting. We're crying uncontrollably in the streets, in their houses, in their temples, in their synagogues, with their children. Hurricane Katrina tapped people's historical memory of the Middle Passage. All the dead bodies in the water, all the people who could not find their way, all the people left without a community. It tapped the memories of slavery. Historical memory is in the water. It's in the trees. It's in the signposts. It's in the architecture. Bats know this. People forget this. We need to be like bats and be able to put to words what we sense. So, the building of an empire brokered on the back of Native and Black people has made us, has made white people in particular, a very nervous and defensive people. A nervous and defensive and aggressive people, because we know we are on stolen land. And until we do right with that, we are destined to continue to be a nervous and defensive people. This is the knowledge we need to take into the classroom, into our activist circles. And with that knowledge, we need to figure out ways, and I know a lot of you are doing this already in your lives, to be healers. I chronicle this historical context since it's the backdrop that we need to get to the question of what it will take to bring tenderness into our lives, into our teaching across race and class and gender and nationality. And that led me to think about my own teaching. Retrospectively, my own approach to teaching has not made enough room for tenderness. For many years, I spent a lot of time castigating the white people in my classes. My own guilt, my own fear, my own shame, I projected onto white students. While I spent a lot of time bending over backwards to be sure that the students of color knew I was their ally, which is deeply condescending. I also tended to talk about and deal with issues of racism and other hierarchies head on. I created communities that put people against the wall. I did not make space for people to deeply listen to each other. So, my body would tell me this. With migraines, with sheer exhaustion instead of exuberance after teaching, with dread. When I would find resistance in the classroom, I would blame it on them and not look at how my own framework was helping to contribute to that very resistance. For me, getting out of that trap required incorporating more and more contemplative practices into my own teaching, to open up spaces for people to not only learn the content, but feel their way through to another place. These contemplative practices have included guided visualizations, energy circles, one-on-one conversations in office hours, free writes, inviting the body into the classroom in new ways. They've included the Who Am I ritual, the use of stories from people's lived experiences, and sitting with each other through the pain. So, I still teach about genocide, I still teach about slavery, I still teach about exploitation, I still teach about colonialism. For example, in the class I'm just finished teaching with these two, we started with teaching Jubilee by Margaret Walker, which is an extraordinary salvo to Gone with the Wind. You know, I recently learned that Gone with the Wind was directed by the same director, Victor Fleming, who directed Wizard of Oz. Now, doesn't that tell you something about Gone with the Wind? So Jubilee is told from the point of view of a black woman. Several generations of her family. It's a novel. It's 496 pages. It's beautifully written. And then I teach the book by Andrea Smith called Conquest, which is the history of sexual abuse, sexual violence of Native women. And then Nelson Mandela's 900-page memoir, A Long Walk to Freedom. There is beauty in the language of these books. There is a three-dimensional analysis made possible in these books. That becomes our common ground. And from that common ground, it's then possible to teach the concepts. So, while teaching Conquest, while teaching Jubilee, while teaching Long Walk to Freedom, I introduce Peggy McIntosh's Knapsack. I introduce Marx's work on class and alienation, Definitions of Dominant Ideology by Gramsci, Historical Amnesia by Adrienne Rich, Decolonizing the Mind by Frantz Fanon. But I do it through the back door. My focus is on novels, poetry, and memoir. The approach draws on the centrality of story, which is also at the center of Native culture. And there are ways in which starting with story makes it possible for people to not start from a place of digging in their heels. I also try to make much more room in my classes for art, for the imaginative space and the life-affirming energy that it gives us. This is what Robin Kelly is writing about in his book called Freedom Dreams, that we need to have the possibility to dream of freedom